Good evening and welcome to Conversations at the Royal. It will be a conversation tonight, so if you are incredibly shy or nervous, hit the person to your left or right to ask the question you want to have asked. And if you're sitting by yourself, you can elbow the imaginary person beside you. My name is Mike Souilliere, and I am the program coordinator for the Early Intervention Program. It's a program here at the Royal that happens in school settings with young people who are in need of support to cope with the daily rigors of what they have to cope with. It's mainly focused on 12 to 18-year-olds. Most of my groups are 12, 13, 14, and 15-year-olds. I have asked them over the last month and a half, 2 months, about what they like about the coaches that coach them, what they don't like about the coaches that coach them, how their parents are supportive, how their parents are not supportive, and what they like and look for in a coach. I'm going to share that knowledge with you. I think talking and listening, actually more importantly listening to young people, we gain a different perspective of what's happening. So ideally, at the end of this discussion, will help you identify your parenting and coaching styles. And as my wife would put it, because she picks most of the clothes I wear, I do have a coaching style, I don't have fashion style. The key with any kind of style is that there's positive and negative, and how that affects the young athletes that we have come into contact with. You'll also learn a bit about the app Be Game Ready, and that's something that we'll go through, and you can ask questions about that too. All right, let's do a warm-up. Now, the warm-up is something called a yes, no, maybe game. So if you answer yes to a question, you put your hand in the air. If you answer no to the question, you'll leave your hand down. If you have conditions, like it's maybe, then you're going to flap. Okay? So can I just see everyone's flap just for a second? Okay, we've got some absolutely awesome flappers in the room. Yeah, we got the back row flapping when they don't even need to flap. We got the really shy flappers, and we got the all-in flappers. Okay. First question, is sport essential? Some hesitation there. Okay, we got some flapping. All right. If you are yes, give me a reason why you believe sport is essential. Now, usually they make you go to the mics, but just shout out and I'll say it so that people can hear it once we record. Okay, you learn a lot of lessons. Okay.
Your body's designed for movement.
Your body's designed for movement. I agree. What else? It's fun?
Structured exercise.
Structured. If someone asks me to go for a run, I will go for a run with them. I will not go for a run by myself. Why is that? I'm lazy. Right? If I have a partner or someone to go with, I will go for a run. For me to get up and go for a run, that couch, I'm way too motivated to stay on that couch. Now, conditions. Oh, sorry, you had... Okay. Okay, it assists with discipline and goal setting. Okay.
So it's social.
It's social. It is. If you play a singular person sport, is it still social? Can be. I know some figure skaters, and they're so intense and competitive that they don't think it's a social event because they hate the people they're skating against. So it depends, but I agree. In most cases, it's a social... My daughters love sports. My older daughter loves sports because of the social aspect. She would not do a single person sport. She got no one to talk to. So that's why. Okay, other reasons. Okay, I would agree that many of the young people that we coach or we are parents to are highly competitive. Some are not. they can kind of show us, I think. What else? Yes.
How to lose?
Teaches you how to lose. Well, until this year, my daughter's soccer team never kept score in the league. But every child on that team knew exactly the score of every game that they played. So just because there's no league keeping score, everyone does.
Because they're competitive.
Okay, go back to your point. Go back to your point. I have some girls on my team that cry after we lose. I have some girls cry after we win. So, yeah, competitive. We'll get back to that. Yes. Yeah. It's a therapy. Okay. Yeah. If young people have a lot of stress when they do a sport, that can be a moment or a span of time where they're getting a break from that stress. Okay? Yeah, at the back.
If you found it builds passion for something, but I think it is something.
I think it definitely builds passion. If you go to hockey rinks in the Ottawa area, there's a lot of passion in the stands too. We'll discuss that a little bit too. Yes? It can build self-esteem. It can also knock the bejesus out of self-esteem. Okay? There's always a yin and a yang, right? There's always the two sides to the coin. Next question. How many people here are coaches? The coach of sport. Okay. How many people are parents? Okay. Any parent coaches? Okay, I'm one of them. All right, we're a special breed. It's difficult to coach your own son or daughter. We'll talk a bit about why. If you're a coach, do you have players that you feel are kind of your favorites? See, there's some hesitant hands, right? Because as a coach, are you supposed to have favorites? We do. Conditions, right? The kids that thank you after every single practice and every game build a rapport with you that's different than the kid that walks off and doesn't think anything that happened there is worthy of a thank you. Right? Do you have players that you coach that are your least favorite to coach? Okay. And immediately people are thinking, oh man, that one player who does the opposite is what I try to get across to them all the time. Okay? I would suggest that those players, when you actually get them to follow what the direction and your expectations, can be your most favorite players. Some still will not be, but some will. Do you have a special sport or coaching moment that you can think of? Do you have a regrettable coaching moment that you can think of? Okay. It's funny how the hands go up for regrettable right away sometimes, because you can think of the mistakes we've made as coaches, and sometimes it's hard to think of the positives. Okay. Here's our slogan quiz. Take a look at these slogans and try to figure out which major sport apparel and equipment manufacturer is behind each one. So number one, pretty easy. Nike. What's interesting is that when I was doing research for this was said by someone who was going to be electrocuted in the States. So when you hear that and you look at that, does that change your perspective on Nike and their slogan? It has an impact on us, doesn't it? I would suggest that we've said things to our players that if we said them in a different context, could have that same shock to it. The next one, so the name of the company is the line and then all in. Does anyone know that one? Say again? Not Under Armour, no.
Poker?
Not a poker one, no. It's not Reebok. Adidas. All day I dream about soccer. You're laughing. That's not how I remember it either. Own the moment. Hockey, Bauer. Yeah. So our hockey player knew that one right away. Own the moment. The last one, which is the one I like the best. Reebok, thank you. I am what I am. And the people that normally say that, like Henri and a few other amazing footballers, I like my team to say this so that they feel that they are the player that they are. Okay? Here are my expectations. Be open-minded. I personally have been coaching for over 28 years, and I am becoming a good coach. Okay? Be courageous. Be courageous means for me is that you're willing to be yourself. I am a loud coach. Everyone in the pitch knows I'm coaching. Everyone in the pitch behind us knows I'm coaching. Everyone in the parking lot at the opposite end of the street knows I'm coaching. But all of my input on the field is positive. Sometimes nauseatingly so, as some people would suggest. But I'm trying to be positive all the time. I had one game where I didn't say a word, and the girls came off and said, "Coach, what's wrong? Are you okay? Is there anything you need to talk about?" Be reflective. And if I can ask you to be reflective tonight, it's to be reflective on how, as a parent, how as a coach, because we learn from looking back. What's that saying? Hindsight is 20/20. Okay? If we reflect back, we can have input on what happens ahead of us. Okay? Be engaged. Be engaged when you coach. Be engaged when you parent. Be engaged tonight. These are my expectations. Okay. I'm going to present Be Game Ready as an app, but when I talk about coaching, it's also app. And it's in color, and each color has a meaning. Okay? So this is the app of coaching. Now, has anyone here had a coach who acted in an aggressive way? Okay. How did they do that? What actions, what words did they use to act in an aggressive way? Finger pointing. If everyone can point at me right now, everybody point. You have 3 fingers pointing directly back at you. So I remember that every time I think of pointing at someone, especially a player, that there's 3 fingers pointing back at me, and that maybe I shouldn't be pointing at them. So yeah, pointing the finger at someone. Do one of these, all right? What else? Loud. It depends on tone too, right? You can be loud and shout something encouraging, or you can be loud and your tone can be really negative. Okay? How else can it be aggressive? Say again? Yes, arguing every call. When I'm coaching, I argue with almost every call that goes against my team, in my mind. I'm like, oh my God, we're not going to get a call tonight. You know, I yell offside when it's offside for both sides. So when my girl's offside and the referee misses it, I'm yelling, that was offside. That was offside, because I'm a commentary coach. I'm saying as a commentary of the whole thing, that's offside. Ref, that goal should not count. I had a situation, we were in a tournament. We played a team who had never won, and the ref allowed us to do a quick kick in, and they weren't ready, they were making a change. And he shouldn't have allowed us to do that. So I walked over to the referee and I said to the referee, that goal shouldn't count because the other team was changing. The game ended 2-2. Their parents were happy that I stepped in and stopped. My parents were pissed off. So you're never going to sway both sides. It's going to happen in a certain way. And I walked into the Tim Hortons after the tournament, and there's parents there going, "Hey, can we buy you a coffee?" I said, "That'd be great. I don't drink coffee, but you can buy me a donut." My dad used to say, "My way or the highway." That was his term, right? The aggressive coach wins at all cost. Okay? What do you think the opposite of the aggressive coach is? Passive, yeah. I call it the jellyfish coach. No backbone, completely likes to, loosey-goosey, does whatever is going to be less causing of waves. How can the passive coach cause issues and problems just like an aggressive coach? How does that happen?
It's going to lose interest.
Definitely.
Aggressive players take that space.
Aggressive players can almost take over the direction of what's happening. Yeah, definitely. Now, you should describe this. There's the word, that word there. Do everyone see it? Okay. It's also hidden here. And when I put this one up, I show the kids, I just put that word there. Okay. We all have one of those. We can all be anywhere along this continuum. Okay? The assertive coach is fair and respectful. But one aggressive player may not feel it's fair, especially if they're one of the top players in the team and they should be out there the last 5 minutes. They should be on every power play. They should be on every penalty kill. They should be on everything. Okay? Describe for me what an assertive coach looks like, or sounds like, or acts like. Do we know?
The phrase good plays or good decisions.
Yeah. There's a key component in that, what you're saying. To be fair and to be respectful is to understand that every player on your team has a different level of what is fair and what is respectful for that player. So knowing your players is a huge component of being assertive. Being passive is you don't really need to know your players very well because you're just letting them do whatever they want. And being aggressive is, it's all what I want. It's not what their needs are. And when you have a coach that talks in a way that's aggressive or passive, that's when the mental health of the players are not being even focused on. But the caveat is that the aggressive coaches, if you look in the professional ranks, some of them are very effective. I can think back to Patrick Waugh pushing down the glass to show his players, because it was very calculated, showing his players that he had their back. He was being very aggressive in that situation. He thought it through and did exactly what he wanted to do for his young team. That was last year, and their team did very well. Now that wanes, right? It doesn't stay at that level. You can't be an aggressive coach and always do that. There's other examples. Okay, so the aggressive, I say the ruler. If you create an environment where players feel embarrassed, how do you think they're going to perform? Because what physically happens when you're embarrassed? You shut down. Right? So if you're playing a sport, and we talked about how it's we're meant to move. When players are not feeling embarrassed, they do things that they don't think about. Okay? And if you've played a sport and you've done something that you weren't thinking about but just happened, it wasn't because you were embarrassed or tense or feeling anything other than just the flow of what's happening. Fearful or hesitant, and that's connected to tension. Our brains send all the signals to our muscles to do different movements. But if your brain's sending signals of, oh no, we got to be fearful here, fight or flight. Have you noticed kids that are embarrassed or being coached in an aggressive way? can do something on the ice or on the soccer field or on the baseball diamond that is completely out of character for them. Have we seen incidents of that? Just recently, a 17-year-old has been charged with assault in a hockey game because of what was happening. And I'm sure there was 5 or 6 incidents or steps that happened before that aggressive play. The passive. Players who are coached by passive coaches lose focus. Or their focus is so off on something else that they're not able to perform. I say aimless or bored. The most difficult player to coach is a player that's bored because they're not engaged. And obviously, with the assertive, you're fair and understanding, all of these things. And do you remember what I asked you, what I was expecting? Remember 1 or 2 of those things? To be clear, you need to reinforce those expectations. So I probably say to my team what I expected them at every practice about 6 times. At the beginning, at the first water break, after the most fun drill they love to do. Tonight, this is what we're planning to do. Tonight, this is what we want to accomplish. Tonight, this is what we're going to do. It's to the point where by the time that practice is over, I say, so what were my expectations? They're like, Coach Mike, you told us so many times. And then they tell me what my expectations were. I'm training their brains so that in the game, it becomes natural to them. And when they feel like they are empowered to have that feeling, and it's not me shouting it at them, I've achieved my goal. Now, I put the arrows because it's a continuum. There are times when you are going to be passive. As parents or as coaches, you're just tired. Have you experienced this? Right? You just don't want to argue. You're just going to let things go for the next 10, 15 minutes because saying something or doing something is just going to cause a whole bunch of other dominoes to fall. And that's okay. But if you're consistently doing that, that's not going to be okay for the mental well-being of your players. And the same with the aggressive. When the aggressive coach starts to lose the room, you heard that term? And usually they fire the coach. Well, if you're a volunteer, they don't normally fire you. They don't ask you back, but they don't normally fire you. They stick with you unless somebody else volunteers, right? And when you look at the arrows for assertive, I have been aggressive when I'm trying to be assertive, and I have been passive too. Here's generally the mindset of either coaches or players that have always been connected to an aggressive coach. So the win at all cost. I had a situation where we were in a tournament, we're down 2-1. One of the girls on my team who sometimes gets injured often, got injured. And my response was, let's pick her up as quickly as we can because there's only 3 or 4 minutes left in the game and we've got all the momentum and everything is going our way, and the faster we get her off and I can change her, then we can go. But that emotionally wasn't what that player needed. And at the end of the day, it didn't matter if we won or lost. So I wasn't keeping the game in perspective then. You mentioned loss of respect for referees and officials. I would like to have a symposium for hockey referees, especially at lower levels when they are like 14, 15, 16 years old, because they take more abuse than anybody should. And I would say soccer is just as bad. Umpires too, I'm assuming. We need to be supportive of them, because I know in my life, every time I do things, I make mistakes. And they're doing the same thing, yet we're yelling at them because they've made a mistake, right? If I don't put the milk back in the exact right spot, or I don't turn the cap all the way, and then someone opens the door really quickly and the milk comes flying out, that's my mistake. I try to blame my youngest daughter, but she's like, Dad, that was you again. Someone mentioned before, team concept is diminished. Why do we need a team concept? I mean, if you're a single figure skater, you might have a team around you. You might have one coach for choreography, one coach for, your program, long program, whatever's happening. But why do we need a team concept? Do we need a team concept? Why?
Support.
Okay. For support of who?
Of each other.
Okay. Yeah, when teams win championships at the professional level, every player has a role, and every role is important. You hear it over and over and over again. If we can generate that for young players to feel like they're part of a team, and you said socialization, right? That was a huge important factor of why we do sport. Yeah, that's one of the big benefits. If you have, I call them prima donnas. If we have players that think they're better than everybody else, how does that affect team concept? Tension. Can you be fair and respectful if you have two players in your team that think they're way better than everybody else? No, it can't happen. Drive to work harder is lost, and the attitude. And skills actually deteriorate when we talk about passive. Completely deteriorate. The projection of getting better and better just levels off, and then it actually drops. Why being assertive is important? It's internal drive. If you have players, and when I asked you at the beginning to think of your favorite players that you've coached, what were some of the aspects or characteristics of those players? Heart. Do we develop heart, or is heart just there? I have both. What about internal drive? They actually want to get better every time they come out to practice or a game. That's hugely important. I see kids that don't want to play the sport that they've played for 5-6 years because they've lost the love of that sport. It's happening more and more as we get into higher age levels. Okay? I think it's more critical for girls, because girls at 13, 14, 15 stop playing sports. Guys may hang on for another year, but you know what? Very good friend of mine, his son, smaller hockey player, but was one of the best in this Gatineau elite program. He felt that it was more important for him to spend time with his girlfriend than to play hockey. Kids are making those choices all the time. We need to respect those choices if they've lost the love of the game. Growth mentally and physically. I would suggest that if we don't look at, and that's why we're here, the mental aspect of developing young players, we're going to lose them. So here's the continuum. I mentioned this, we're not always assertive. And those parents in the room, sometimes we just react, right? And do we normally react in an assertive way, or do we not react in a passive or aggressive way? Yeah, aggressive for me. Sometimes passive. So if we react in that way, how we follow that up can be assertive if we practice it. We mentioned this already. Kids are being silly, and someone gets hurt. I've had this happen on my teams, and the injury one injury was substantial. So they were just being kids. But we can react in a very negative way when that happens. When I say damaging and traumatic, the young people I talked to over the last month and a half have explained to me how those situations can be damaging and traumatic for them. The car ride home. Let's talk about the car ride home. How many people have experienced from their parents the car ride home? Okay. How many people have had the car ride home conversation with their young person? Okay, good. What is it about the car ride home that creates the kind of discussions that we have? Give me one thing. They are yes, thank you, they're trapped. They are a captive audience. Captive. They cannot get out of that car because you're driving at 80 kilometers an hour. Okay? Or more, depending on how angry you are over the whole situation that's happened. Okay? My dad, who was how to describe it. If you remember Harry Neal and a few other coaches that coached in the NHL, my dad was one of the guys that essentially gave them their certification so they could coach at national and international levels. So I'm from a very long line of very high-end coaches. And my dad could, down to the second, he would say, Mike, at 2 minutes and 42 seconds, your hands were this close on the hockey stick. What were you thinking? My reaction was, at 2 minutes and 41 seconds of which period? My concept to me was just not, it was totally foreign. And if there was that much detail in their criticism, I had no way of responding. Who benefits from the car ride home talk? Players don't. Do we need to vent? If that's a need for us, then stay in the car after your son or daughter gets out of the car and have that same conversation. You may look like it's strange, but that's way more beneficial to your son or daughter than the car ride home talk, I would suggest. My car ride home talk now with my daughter is, what was the best part of the game tonight? And she'll say, well, I'll tell you the worst part, because she's thinking about the worst part. All right? I always say this in all my presentations, we have 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason. My grandmother taught me this, and I don't know where she learned it from, but some philosopher probably said it. So we should listen twice as much as we talk. Right? I always say we have the opportunity to listen twice as much as we talk. Other situations, and I've seen this happen, as you're leaving the field or the ice rink, the very first thing that parent says to that player, what were you doing out there? Well, or they ask 3 questions in succession. What the heck were you thinking? Why'd you take that penalty? What was going on there? You know what the loose definition of interrogation is? 3 questions without time for response. We do that, don't we? Here's some positive coaching tips. Someone mentioned this. Keep the game in perspective. Okay? I remind myself every start of the game when I make out my lineup sheet, had 16 players that are going to be playing that game, and I think to myself, how can I make all 16 get something of value from this game? As opposed to, how can I coach to win? How can I create a situation where someone else or something is going positively for this team? I look at all those players. It reminds me to keep it in perspective. Now, if you go on YouTube, you can get a whole bunch of, just type in, coach loses it. Okay? TSN has the top 10 coach loses it moments. one of the coaches breaks 2 or 3 sticks. You can see the guys on the bench, professional hockey players, going all the time because they're fearful that he's going to hit them with a hockey stick. Like that's not so good. This is a key one. Because again, your favorite players are players where they feel that they have faith in themselves, and when we talk about team concept, they have complete faith in their other teammates. I would suggest that the best teams, you're only as good as the 5 weakest players on your team. So my goal is to make those 5 weakest players much better over the course of the season by putting them in situations that they get experience. Because at the end of your season, as a coach, if your 5 weakest players are still your 5 weakest players, you have not been an assertive coach. I can vividly remember last season, a coach yelling at his team, and he said, "You're playing like you're 9 years old. These are 11-year-olds. I coached you when you were 9, and you're doing the same crap now." And then he turned and looked at me and he said, "You're way better than these guys. Show them." And I looked back at him and kind of gave him a smile and called him a name I won't say right now. Not loud enough that my players could hear me, but I wasn't proud of that reaction. But when my girls came off that field, we lost 3-2. They were so happy. He said, "Oh my God, coach, we almost beat them." Yeah, we almost did. And we made that coach so mad. It was so funny. So they were completely enthralled with creating a situation where, and our goal was to make them make mistakes. We didn't talk about how many goals we'd score or how many goals they'd score. We pressured them so that they made mistake after mistake after mistake. That was our goal. And every player believed that they can do that. That was amazing. We talked about this. Every player that you coach, if you have more than one child, raise your hands if you have more than one child. Okay. The playbook for the first child does not work for the playbook for the second child, correct? You figured out one aspect of one and then the other one's completely opposite. Their personalities. That's a fact. It's the same with your players. Here's one, because I'm a talker, I always ask questions. And when I ask my players questions, I wait for as many answers as they're willing to give. So I'll say to them at halftime, "What are we doing well?" Keep getting feedback, keep getting feedback. What can we do better? What was our goal at the beginning? Are they meshing together? Sometimes yes, sometimes no. Okay, what are we going to do about it? And I say it like that. I don't say, "What are we going to do about it?" You know, that kind of tone where you're mad at what's happening. Ask them questions. And listen to their answers. And then give them feedback on that. And how can we change it? What can we do? I would say I coached 16 games last year, and 14 of the games, at least one girl on my team cried. Cried because they got injured, cried because they were upset at something, cried because whatever reason they were crying. That's going to happen. Now, I've coached boys' teams. They don't cry as much. Why do you think they don't? They have to have a certain image of themselves that they project to others where they're not going to show their emotion. When you talk one-on-one, more emotion comes out than when they're in a group setting. Okay? So sometimes with certain players, you need to have conversations one-on-one with them to allow them to express their emotion. In my girls' teams, they don't like to compete against each other. They like to compete as a team against other teams. Right? The boys love to compete against each other because it's that bravado. Right? How do we create we talk about emotionally safe environments. How do we create that? Build trust. Build trust. How do you build trust? Yeah.
You speak about yourself to them.
I think you relate to what they're going through, sometimes by what you've gone through. Yeah, that can build trust. Being consistent builds trust. Being honest. Remember those, my expectations? If I do something or say something that doesn't work out, I will say, you know what? That plan was not a good plan. We need to reevaluate. Because if I'm honest with them, I don't outcoach every coach that I coach against. I don't. So to create a safe environment, you've got to be willing to say that didn't work out and why didn't it work out. And listen. It's interesting. Safe environment. My youngest daughter wants me to be harder on the girls because that will get them to work harder. And I asked her, I said, so which one of your teammates do you think that'll work? And she says, me. Okay. Who else? So she names off 3 other girls. I said, we have 16 on our team. How am I supposed to do that just for you 3 or 4? So we figured out that when they warm up, I have 3 or 4 warming up, leading the warm-up, and as they're leading the warm-up, I'm giving them the instruction that they like. And the ones that aren't leading the warm-up, I'm giving them feedback on different goals that we have in a different way. And that seems to really help. So treating each player differently is still being fair and understanding. Here's the other component. The assertive coach challenges them. Okay? Not getting in their face and yelling and screaming, but challenges them to improve. I'd rather have a season where we start here and we build towards the end of the season than to shoot up and then down and shoot up and then down and shoot up and then down. So our goals have to be connected to that. The last one is, and this is something that we tend to be set in our ways. Right? We like things the way we like them. If you have a certain favorite dinner, you like it that way. You don't want things to change, correct? Right? Think of your favorite food. You don't want them to mess with what you like. But in coaching and parenting, we've got to be flexible. Right? I did a bunch of research, and I mentioned before, majority of my research is talking to young people about what's happening. I will have this posted so that you can actually read some of the really interesting research that's going on about all of what we talked about. Now, you watch, I love this. I'm not computer savvy at all, but I figured out how to do this, and there we go. Okay. The ripple effect. Everything that we've talked about tonight, everything that you do has ripples. Because your actions create, if you imagine dropping something into a pool of water, it creates ripples. Then they're both positive and negative. Okay? So if you're mindful of that, what you will do in the future, you will look for and be reflective of whether it was positive or negative. All right, we're going to talk a bit about Be Game Ready. Do you have any questions or comments? Does it make sense? You're probably already doing this. Because if you came out here, and we're planning to come out here last Tuesday, you're already connected and want to learn more and want to be all those expectations. It's the parents and coaches that aren't here that we may need to have impact on. And when I talk about ripple effects, we can have a positive ripple effect on them. I've suggested to some parents that are more quiet when their young person's playing hockey and there's really loud people, sometimes they record them and play it back to them, and hopefully they know them well enough that they're going to be, understanding of what's happening. But they'll also ask them questions. Why are you giving them instruction while they're playing? The coach is going to give them instruction. Do you think it helps? Right? When you see a mother or father screaming at their young son who is 9 years old to shoot the puck, and they have the puck at their own blue line, do you think that is helping? It's not. But we hear it all the time. So let's talk a bit about Be Game Ready. Let's see if this is going to work. All right. So Be Game Ready is an app that the Do It for Darren Foundation and the Sens Foundation and the Royal partnered together to create something that, now it's specifically for hockey, but all of my soccer teams are using it, to promote mental awareness, mental well-being for those players. But there's ways to use it as a coach that we'll talk about.
Do you want to play at your best? Are you game ready?
Being a hockey player requires not only physical strength and speed, but also concentration, visualization, and the ability to make the right decisions on and off the ice.
You need a healthy mind to play your best because your brain controls everything you do.
It's called the mind and body connection.
Use this app. Take care of your brain just like you take care of your body, and you will be game ready.
So the app was set up in two halves, mainly because we feel it's important that they prepare before and reflect and kind of be able to look back after. So the bag is open because it's specifically hockey, but I always say to the girls for soccer, imagine when I ask you, because I send an email out to all my players the day before a game, is your kit ready? Because inevitably, what happens when you get to the pitch? Someone's forgotten a shoe, or a shin pad, or a sock, or when I emailed them to say bring both their red and white jersey, only the red's packed. You want to create tension, anxiety, and a sense of not feeling prepared? Have someone come to the game not with all their stuff. And then watch the parent drive home as fast as they can to get it, right? Have you ever done that? It's funny how we've all done it. I told you about my dad. He looked into the garbage and pulled out an old case of beer made of cardboard and wrapped that around my leg and taped it because I forgot my shin pad, right? So great problem solving. I was terrified that I was going to get injured, but I wore a case of beer on my leg that game. Mood stats. Here's a key component. We borrowed this from Healthy Minds, which is an app that was generated here at the Royal. Now, if you look at the moods here, I'll ask you to say stop when you want me to stop. I'm waiting for you to say stop. Okay, well, we're back to happy. When, while you're coaching or as a parent, would you feel happy? When, as a parent or a coach, would you feel happy? Yes, when you see joy and enthusiasm with the athletes that are doing whatever sport you're coaching. Okay. Why is that important? Isn't that the goal? Right? You want them to enjoy and appreciate and have fun. So there's positive ones and there's negative ones. Because our emotions aren't always positive. So how during a sport could someone feel lonely? Yep. Okay? Yeah, no one's engaging them in the play. You feel, oh, you've made a huge mistake. Okay. Yeah. Because even though your teammates, and even if you have good team concept, they may look at you in a way that you emotionally get the message. Right? If we talk about it, it doesn't take away the mistake. But the more that it's actually expressed, maybe they can learn from it. Okay? What's interesting, and I don't know if we have any on here, but over the course of a season, and my daughter's looks like this. It's a huge up and down. It's good for them, for adolescents today, to be able to reflect back at how they felt before. In our generation, well, I'll speak for my generation, we used to write things down or have journals or other stuff, right? It's amazing. I was with a group yesterday, and I'd written the answers to a question in cursive. And I didn't even have to hide it because they couldn't read cursive. And they're looking and they're going, that's the answer. So it's amazing how the different generations are having difficulty with certain things. So if they can track and see at the beginning of the season there was more downs than ups, and then now things are more positive, that reflection is really going to help them with their mental wellness. So we have videos about the brain and how the brain helps. If you can do this for me, put your hands together like this. Now, where your thumbs are is your frontal cortex. If you're coaching any young person under the age of 16, that part's not fully developed yet. And you know that because that's where reasoning, logic, understanding someone else's point of view remains in our lives, right? Now, where your little fingers are, that is developed before we're born. And when you're born, and all of us did this, what was the very first thing you did when you were born? Cried. And as you're crying, you're doing what? You're breathing. You spent many months in a liquid environment, and now it's the first breath. If you didn't have that little part where your little fingers are, we'd all be dead. So thankfully, that's already developed. Now, the next thing we did was, some of us did this with our mom, the boob, yeah? We breastfed. Our brains were already developed enough that we were able to, and people sometimes take offense, we were boob suckers. Right? We were able to draw food from the front of our mouth to our back of and swallow. That's the little finger. Now, majority of the young people we coach, the thumbs part is still developing. So if we expect them to be able to logically and rationally make decisions, we are going to be set up for failure. Okay? Remember the basics. And that key is that they will actually be able to function at that basic level. And we're hoping that we're developing, as we're coaching positively, the frontal part. So we talked to them about the brain, and we were able to get them more information. Every piece of equipment signifies something that we can be supportive. And this is what we talk about when we talk about being partners with them. Sleep is hugely important. If we get enough rest, we know this, right? How do we act when we don't get enough sleep? Give me one way that you react when you don't get enough sleep. Irrationally? Completely impatient, yes. Grumpy? emotional ups and downs. Now, when kids don't get enough sleep, they do the same thing. So the app is connected to what we call a mind and body connection. Now, most young people, especially the 9, 10, 11-year-olds, do not read through everything on this app because that's like homework, right? And other than the snow days last week and the fact that some kids had a PD day and they had a 6-day weekend, which was interesting because when I got back to some of the schools that I work at, they were like, yeah, I was bored. So 6 days away from school and they were bored. They won't tell you that, but they tell me that. So we need to challenge them and give them information that they can get over time. But you can sit down with your young person and say, hey, I just tapped on the shin pads. Do you remember what the shin pads were all about? They're like, no. Okay, it's a word called resilience. What does that mean? Well, when bad things happen and you get through them, you build resilience. Why is that good? Well, because life is not going to be a rosy sunshine parade every day. It's going to be weather like today and yesterday and last week. Right? I don't want to see my shovel again. I hate my shovel. Right? I have a passion for hating my shovel right now. But that's not going to be the same for the next 3 months, hopefully. We also have a really neat hockey cards. And these are ways that kids can express themselves. Now, you've heard of selfies, correct? Yeah. Raise your hand if you've ever taken a selfie. All right, so we're all part of the selfie generation. The hockey card is their way of expressing a certain span of time. And if you've ever lived through a slideshow of somebody else's vacation, which those of us who are much older than the younger people in the room have had to deal with, okay? It's their expression. Let them do it in a way that it is for them, okay? And they can send these to friends, they can send them to aunts and uncles, they can send them to grandparents. It's really something for them to send. We also have what we call power pucks. And if you know what a cool celly is, then you're really in touch with what hockey's all about. You don't know what a cool celly is? After a goal or a great play, you celebrate. And so cool cellies, if you watch the NHL players, they have a few of them, like Jaromir Jagr does that. Hands raised, the bow and the arrow, monkey off your back, okay? There's lots of them. So the kids love them because they are driven by doing something like that. And I think that's an expression of joy. And if it doesn't last too long, I think it's great. And as long as it's not showing up, the other team, I think it's something that should be enjoyed. We have a DIFD puck. We have a sensational puck too. So how can you as a coach promote this with your team? I have my team, and we're having tryouts right now. Right? Some people call them sort outs. We have tryouts. One of the most stressful times of any season. I'm having them chart how they feel before and after the tryouts. Now, I had 2 girls be so upset that they couldn't do it. So my expectation is reflect after. But I ask them to, but I don't check up on them. Because once they start to feel like they're getting something from it, I won't have to even remind them. They will do it over and over and over again. And isn't that the goal? The goal is to have them self-regulate and be connected to how they're thinking and feeling. And guess what? When they are more comfortable doing that, they will actually talk to us as coaches and parents. Right? Did anyone hear the just a sec when you want to talk or have some person do something for you, like my oldest daughter? Just a sec, just a sec, just a sec. Right? Now, if I do that to her, Dad, we have to go. The dance is starting in 15 minutes. Just a sec. I'm at the door, I'm ready. Just a sec. Dad, get your boots on. Just a sec. Right? And I do that and I say, I'm going to get ready because I know how important it is to you. But remember how frustrating it is when I said just a sec 3 times? Yesterday I heard it 12 times. No, it wasn't 12 times, and then they have to argue with me about it. Okay, it was 6 times. We'll negotiate it. Okay? But this can facilitate more conversation, and that's the key. Because you want your players and want your kids to talk to you on their terms. Because what happens when you talk to them? This is another thing about coaching. I had kids tell me over the last month and a half that they've had coaches talk to them for over 20 minutes at a time because of bad game. And the parents weren't allowed to come in the room, and they just essentially had a coach getting upset talk for over 20 minutes. When we talk about damaging and traumatic, that's exactly what those things are. I'd love to be in arenas and just knock on the door and then pass in the, hey, mental health, be game ready. Did you read this? This is what kids have been telling me over and over again, and this is exactly what you're doing. Right? But we can't. I wish we could. Okay, so any questions about this at all? Yeah. It's how you do it, and to expect, depending on the age of the kids, to sit and listen for 20 minutes and you're talking at them. If you are talking with them, 20 minutes isn't that long. If you're talking at them, 20 minutes is way too long. It is the context. The assertive coach doesn't allow things to get so off the rails and brings the team and the players back onto what the goals are right away. You don't just let it slide. That's the passive coach. So I'm not saying as coaches and as parents, we let things go. Because that laissez-faire relationship makes it just, it's harder to pull back when they're way far away from where the track is for the goal. You're going to have players that stray. You're going to have players that are going to go off on different tangents in different directions. That's okay. But bringing them back right away and saying, here's our focus, here's the goal, it's much easier. And do it when things are good. Okay, the analogy of if your team has had a 5-game losing streak and it's because they're off the rails, why isn't the talk happening over the first loss, second loss, and third loss? And why is this big blow up in the 5th loss? Because there's times to pull it back in. I describe it as, when things are going really well, that's when you prepare. It's the old analogy with a ship. You're not going to repair the ship when you're in heavy waves. You're going to wait till it's calm, then you repair everything, and then you get everything going. That's what you need to do. Yeah. I think timing is important. I think who sends the message. If you're the head coach, you don't always have to be sending the message all the time. I think hearing it from an assistant coach or a trainer or someone else to say, we really need to pick it up because what we're doing is not showing our skill. We have way more skill than this. We need to show it more. How do we do that? Sometimes that message can be deferred to someone else. Right? You know that watching Charlie Brown and the Peanuts and the teacher's voice? Wah, 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 wah. That's what it becomes if you're talking at players or your kids for 20 minutes. I had kids tell me, on the car ride home, they'll put their earbuds in, and because they're mostly girls, and they put their hair down, and they just nod their head. Every minute and a half, they nod their head. They know because the song's almost over, and they'll nod their head. So who's getting the value out of that? And I think that's the thing. If you have a coach that's ranting for 20 minutes after a game, I think they're venting. And venting at young players doesn't benefit the players. I always think, how is this benefiting them and their, we call it long-term development for a reason. because we want them to develop long term and not have that, remember the passive, where they essentially lose their skills. We want them to keep moving forward. Other questions or comments? Yes. It's a great question. And the question was, why are we promoting an app when, in a lot of situations, we have a specific anxiety, a phone anxiety that young people have, that we talk about mental health in that way? I would suggest that the majority of young people, whether they have mental health issues or not, are connected to internet, their phone. They're so it's such a cultural for that age group that if we can have them experience this in that way, I think it's a net benefit as opposed to a net negative. But I understand your point that should we have them want to talk to us or sit down and have those kind of conversations? Yes. Are we having young people who have mental health issues talking as much as they need to? It's not happening. I would agree with you that every person, not just child, we're all on that continuum of either sometimes we're very, very mentally healthy and sometimes we're not. Exactly. I think because in a developing brain, if we take every opportunity to open a door that allows them to express themselves, to experience something positive that's going to enrich them, we need to do that. I think that there are young people who I know with the Healthy Minds before we had this app that would use it in a way that would enrich their lives. And they weren't able to talk to anyone around them. They didn't feel that they deserved that connection. If they can do it in a way that is online or a way that is just connected with a device, I think that can be positive for them. I would much rather have young people do what we did before we had these things and talk to a trusted friend, have intergenerational connections. Right? I can remember talking with an aunt, uncle, people who are older and not my parents about stuff that I wouldn't tell my parents, which I think is hugely effective. And I think as coaches, we can be that. And as teachers, I know many of the young people I work with, their teacher is more of an influence because of how they're dealing with parents or situations of divorce or other things happening, that is their strongest connection. So I wish we weren't in a world where we needed to have these many different ways to have young people be able to connect and get more fulfillment out of their lives or to be able to express themselves. But I think we need to have that available to them. Oh, that if we sat down with pen and paper and essentially wrote down or used the older methods other than technology, that could be more beneficial. I agree. If we can have that opportunity to do that, that'd be great. What I'm seeing in the schools is that we're moving away from that one-on-one time to sit down, and it's much more connected to, okay, let's team teach and do this and team teach and do that, and there's less of that one-on-one where that person feels like they're the only thing, the only person in that world right now that is actually getting that attention. So yeah, I think it's lacking. Sorry, there's a question at the top. We're talking about protective factors. A protective factor of having an adult in their lives that actually cares a lot about them and shows it by listening this will never replace that. If this directs someone to that kind of connection, I think that would be great. It's very true. I think when I have what's called, we have a team meeting and we talk, and then I have group stuff that there's 4 or 5 of my players that are doing things, and I'll move over to those smaller groups and be able to talk to that smaller group. And I say to them, okay, so if you're injured or you have something that's not making you able to be as performing as well as you'd like to be performing, come and talk to me about it, because I would need to know that. And they'll come over and say, well, I don't want to say that my knee still hurts, but it does. And if they feel comfortable to do that, you're trying to set the environment up that they're able to feel comfortable doing that. Now I have one young lady on my team She doesn't like any one-on-one. She wants other people around. I'll walk with her off the field and she'll walk towards other players. So we'll start talking with the other players there. I've noticed it, and I don't put her in that one-to-one scenario because she's not comfortable. But I agree, if you can generate that, it's hugely beneficial. Because in a team setting, they may not say exactly what they want to say with everybody else there. But yeah, you need to build that. Other questions or comments? Yes. We targeted for 10 to 16. I had an email the first week it was launched from a mother whose 6-year-old son is in Timbits hockey. And he was so upset when he would make a mistake because he was let his team down. So he went on the app with his mom there, and he just said, here's how I feel if I make a mistake. And she was great. And she said, well, do other players on your team make mistakes? And this is that connection that you just talked about. And he said, yeah. Do you think they feel the same way? They might. Okay. So it's not that lonely feeling that you're feeling. Other people are doing it. So that was nice that we were able to get that parent and that young person to have that connection. And I think that's what I want to see more of. Yeah. Yes, that. Yeah, at the SENS Plex, they had 15 and 16-year-olds that were in the elite program, and they really liked some of the breathing techniques because there's some connected mindfulness in here. A lot of the boys' teams that I've done it with think it's really corny until they actually do it a couple times, and they actually see that they're more calm and more relaxed, and they really buy into it. And some of the elite athletes are like, okay, I'm all pumped up. If you're too stressed, you're not going to be performing at your optimum. If you're too relaxed, you're not going to be performing. So you have to find that balance. So some of the elite athletes, and they also like the feature where you can add to your calendar because they're so busy. If they're in an elite program and they need to organize their day, they are able to do that through the app. And that's something that they really liked. They weren't sending power pucks to their friends because it wasn't cool, right? And how they're seen is really important. So yeah, so elite athletes are using it for the calendar feature. And they also like the fact that it's promoted by Luke Richardson, who, he's been in the NHL 20 years and he's now a coach. So he values it because he can build those individual connections with players. And that's important. Yeah. Yes. We recommend, and I've said this to coaches, the kids bring their devices to the game, and before the pregame speech, because the coaches usually have something they want to tell their team, they will track, or either the car ride home or the car ride there, they can do a breathing exercise or they can track how they're feeling and just put it in there and then set that aside and get focused. Part of what this is about, and we have some visualizations in there, so that they can train their brain to be ready. Okay? And the visualizations are examples, but for my group, for the tryouts, I said, imagine yourself making the play that you want to make in your mind. Because that visualization is going to help you when you get into that situation. And we're training them for that as they practice. So yeah, one person that I was working with this week said, I go on the app to keep my mother quiet on the ride home. I said, is it effective? Yes, but what if you want to talk to her about what's going on the app? Well, I do, and I just, while she's driving, I will say, here's how I'm feeling, or tell me to stop, and she will control that conversation. And it's very empowering for her not to be listening to what's being, as she put it, barked at. She likes to control that conversation. So it almost empowers her to say, well, Mom, here's how I'm feeling now. Like tired of talking about this. Okay. Then can we plan? And I said this to her. Can you tell your mom that you can plan to talk about it another time? Because then you're held to making that plan to actually talk about it. Because both people need to talk in that situation. Yep. Great point that they are able to, as athletes, because adolescence can sometimes be so, this moment is everything. As opposed to, whoa, wait a minute. I've had this moment before, and then things got better. Yeah, that's great. And the fact that he's sharing it with other wrestlers, I would say to the Ottawa teams, the more you're mentally ready, the better you will be. And when they start seeing that, that's really, it reinforces for themselves. Yes?
Sorry, I didn't get the chance to hear, where do we get access to this?
It is available free on the iOS system, so any Apple product. It's also free on any Android product.
And is it designed for only team sport or like a lot of the figure skating?
It is designed specifically for hockey and hockey players. That said, my soccer teams use it, and we essentially use it as tracking our moods, also doing the breathing exercises. All of that stuff is not hockey specific. Any sport, whether it's team or individual, they can use those aspects, and it can be beneficial for them. Yeah. How's that? I didn't get to this slide here, which this is one that I've used in the past about the adolescent brain. I'll put it up, but I'll wait till you get that. Okay. So I'd like to show this to parents. If you, this is the part, we talk about the birds and the bees lobe, but that's the logical, practical, and reasoning. Resistance to peer pressure is tiny. Ability to be seen in public with parents, tiny. Okay? My daughter feels like I embarrass her every minute of every day we're out in the community. Love for parents, disdain for parents. That yin and yang we talked about. Fitting in gland, self-image, prone to bruising. Memory for music. My daughter won a contest. There used to be a game show where, can you name that tune? And so the people who are my age are nodding their heads. The younger people are like, what the heck? That's the stupidest thing. She can do that, the first two notes of any song on, what's that, Hot 89.9. It's amazing. Will that skill translate to anything else? Who knows? Cool gauge. Yeah. Judgment gland, it's hiding right here. Yeah. Memory for chores and homework, tiny as well. Have you ever had this? I've had this when I've coached. I ask them to do a certain drill, and then something distracts them, and they have no concept of what I've just asked them to do. Can you go down into the freezer and grab a loaf of bread because your mom needs it? Yep, just a sec. And then 20 minutes later, did you get that? You didn't ask me to get that milk or get that bread or get whatever. I completely agree. I didn't ask you. Only twice. Okay. Well, thank you very much for taking time out of your busy schedule to come and interact with me today. I enjoyed it. Thank you.